right, here we go. Well, this is now round two. I started off the original recording. I gotta tell you, it was funny. It was so funny, but it recorded with no sound. So I guess that's not really very funny. So I'm gonna try to be funny in this one. You just never know. All right, ecology. Ecology. Now, I will tell you, ecology is my favorite. I love it. I love ecology. So you will too. There you go. Okay, so ecology. This is the study of relationships, of interaction. Whoa. So the interactions between organisms and their environment. The big focus here is on energy transfer. The transfer, how much energy is transferred as you go to the different levels. But what is happening between these living organisms and their environment? And oh, it's just so fun to study. And like I said, it is the study of those relationships. All right, so what exactly do we mean by environment? Well, we could talk about the squirrels, the bear, the deer, the plants. Those would all be the living, the biotic factors. Remember, we looked at bio means life, and so the biotic factors are all of the living organisms. And then hello, hello, next. Oh, I'm not really sure what just happened. It's not letting me go. Oh, I know why. Oh, there we go. And then we have the abiotic factors. So you have those, again, living, and A, remember A means without, so without life. So the abiotic factors, and you have temperature, soil, light, all those things have air current, moisture, all of those things have an effect on there's an effect on living organisms from those abiotic factors. So we'll look at the effect of both of the living and the non-living. Okay, so here is a chart going from the most simplest to the most complex in this levels of organization. So we're going to start here at the organism. So the organism is any unicellular. Remember, uni means, I heard it. Uni means one. So a one-celled organism or multicellular. So more than one. And but it's an individual. This is the lowest level of organization. It's one fish. It's one bear, all right? So that's just one of it. Now, we move up in that level and we take a population. So this is one species living in the same place at the same time. So instead of looking at one zebra, which would be one organism, we're looking at all of these zebras here that live in the same place in a particular area and at the same time. So, for example, you would all be ninth graders, so that would be one species at Hewitt-Trussville High School in 2014. So that you would be a population of ninth graders because you're one species at the same place at the same time. Now the whole interbreeding thing, we're not gonna include that with our ninth graders because it's not happening. But so the other thing that their piece of information that's related to a population is they produce fertile offspring, which means they can have babies. And so, and then lastly here, we're looking at this competition, competing with each other for resources. Those resources being food, mates, shelter, whatever the resources would be. We're going to play a really fun game with this coming up too. But we'll compete. So there's that competition. Now, once we hit the next level, so we've had organism, population, now we're a community. So now we take those populations, so more than one lion or more than one wolf, and they're interacting with one another. So these populations, all these different populations are interacting with each other. They're still in a common environment. They're still in the same place. And they're interdependent because they all need each other. This herbivore right here is eaten by the carnivore. and the herbivore needs the plants, the consumers, I mean the producers. So they all need each other here. It's a very important relationship. Now we move to the ecosystem. Now we've moved past the looking at just how the living things interact. Now we're looking at how the living things and the non-living things, the abiotic factors, how do they interact with each other? So we're talking about fish and coral or different plants in the ocean, and how those living things interact with the non-living things, the water, the amount of sunlight, the soil, those sorts of things. So how do the living and non-living things interact? And then we move to the biosphere, the most complex, the highest level of organization. And bio, of course, means life, and sphere means circle. It's the circle of life. Okay, well, now you see why I teach and I don't sing. All right, so the biosphere, that's a sphere. That is where life is it's the portions of the earth that support the life. And it has the air, the land, the fresh water, salt water, every place where living things would live. Well, that was a tough statement. All right, now let's compare the habitat versus the niche. I like that word. That's pronounced niche. It's not niche or nishy. There's be cool though, the niche. It's not, it's niche. All right, so the niche is the actual role a species plays in a community. So let me give you an example. Hewitt-Trussville High School is a community. Your niche is as a student. That's the role you play at Hewitt-Trussville. My niche is different than your niche. My niche is as a teacher. The principal's niche is as a principal. The janitor's niche is as a janitor. So everyone plays a different role in that community. Now the actual habitat is the place where the organism lives out its life. Where is it at? All right. And this niche is determined by the tolerance limitations of an organism or its limiting factors. What limits that organism from surviving? So a limiting factor can be anything biotic or abiotic. So it can be living or non-living, and it's going to restrict its existence. That could be the amount of water. That could be the amount of food. It could be, do I have a good enough shelter that's going to keep me warm or keep me cool? Even though I am already cool. Right here. So some more examples. Water, food, temperature, the amount of space, the availability of mates. Very important. Your species can't survive if you can't find a mate. All right. Now let's look at some feeding relationships. There's three main types. You have your producer-consumer. So you have the producer being the autotroph, the plants, and then the consumer that feeds on the producer. You have your predator-prey. So something is hunting something else. And then you have your parasite and host. You have different relationships where some are benefiting, and in this case, one is benefiting and the other is being harmed. Okay, so let's look at these. The producer. This is, in this feeding relationship, the producer is the autotroph. This is the plant. They're producing their own food. They trap energy from the sun. What's that process called? Photosynthesis. Yes, indeed. Now, it says it's at the bottom of the food chain, but don't get that confused with being unimportant, because obviously they're in the greatest abundance, and we'll look at how much energy they produce and why that's so important. All right, that's going to be an Ecology 2 video, so you're just going to have to hold on. It's like the sequel coming up, and you just can't wait for the next show. All right, now the next one is the consumer. So the consumer is going to all heterotrophs. Anything that eats anything is a consumer. And there's many different types. Herbivores, carnivores, omnivores, decomposers. We'll look at these. All right, so you have, within the consumers, you have primary consumers, secondary consumers, tertiary consumers, so on and so forth. So the primary consumer, think about the word primary. It's primary. It's the first one. So a primary consumer is the first one to eat a producer. So you have producer and then primary consumer. The cow right here is a primary consumer. They eat plants. They're herbivores. They're eating the producers. All right? We move on into the secondary consumer, and that is something that eats the herbivore. So the first animal that eats a herbivore, so the wolf that eats the bunny is a herbivore, and the wolf is eating the herbivore. Make sense? All right. And tertiary is going to be a carnivore that eats another carnivore that eats a herbivore that eats the producer. All right. So, of course, a carnivore being one that eats meat. And I think we understand this whole predator-prey situation pretty well here in Alabama. They hunt prey animals for their food. That's you, the hunter, going out there getting the deer or the turkey or whatever it is that you hunt. You can also have a consumer relationship where they're still carnivores, they're still eating meat, but they're scavengers. They're feeding on dead animals. And let me tell you, they stink. They stink bad because they're eating dead, decaying stuff. So even if you get one of their feathers, they stink. Oof. Little air freshener, maybe a Tic Tac would be good. All right, so an omnivore. Another type, eat both plants and animals. Good way to tell that they're omnivores. They have both sets of teeth. So they have the grinder molars to grind up the plants like a herbivore would. And then meaning because we're omnivores, humans. And then they also have the sharp teeth for ripping and tearing the flesh like a carnivore. And we have our decomposers, very important. They break down the dead, decaying plants and animals into something that's simpler that can be absorbed. Very important. Think about it. If we didn't have them, all the dead stuff would still be laying around. Oof, gross. Talk about stinky. All right, symbiotic relationships. Sym means together, bio means living. These are two species living together. All right, so you have a commensalistic relationship, parasitic, and mutualistic. Commensalism, you have one species that benefits, the other is neither harmed nor helped. There's no effect on it. We're going to look at some examples of these in more detail in class. So, move on back here. Commensalism, again, one species benefits and the other, nothing's happening to it. We move on over to parasitism on the other hand. One species benefits, the other is harmed. This we understand well here in Alabama with the tick. And so the tick is going to benefit and eventually it's going to harm its host. It's not a pretty picture, let me tell you. And another good example here is this is called a cleaning wrasse, and it's a fish that comes along and actually this is not a cleaning wrasse. This is a parasite that attaches to the fish and it's going to damage the fish. It's going to kill the fish. This is going to survive, and this is going to kill the fish. And mutualism is beneficial to both species. So these birds, these cleaning birds, they eat the bacteria and stuff off of the rhino here. And I almost called it a hippo. And they eat that off of it, and at the same time, the rhino gets cleaned off, gets a little bath. We're going to look at some more examples. I love examples of these three relationships. They're very exciting, just so exciting. All right, here's a great chart. So again, commensalism, one benefits, one nothing happens. Parasitism, one is harmed, the other benefits. Mutualism, hey, it's mutual. We're both having a good time. That's all we have for today's show. Stay tuned for Ecology 2, and the fun really, really begins. Have a marvelous evening.